Hi, I'm Arya. They told me I was always the practical one, the quiet one, the one who didn't need much. When I was younger, I thought that was a compliment. I wore it like a badge of honor. I was the steady daughter, the helper, the listener. I didn't throw tantrums, didn't ask for much, didn't rock the boat. So when my parents said they were proud of how independent I was, I smiled. I believed them. I believed that quiet competence was love. I believed that being the low-maintenance daughter made me valued. It took me years to understand that what they actually meant was, "You'll survive without our help." And that meant they could give what was meant for me to someone else. I found out about the college fund on a Sunday morning. I remember because the sun was coming through the kitchen window in soft streaks, catching the dust in the air. My mother was at the stove, flipping pancakes, humming. My father was reading the paper like it was 1985, and the whole room smelled like maple syrup. That's when my sister walked in, radiant and chaotic as always, dropping her purse on the counter like it lived there, and announced she'd been accepted into a private graduate program in Paris. I congratulated her with genuine joy in my chest, even though she had never finished her undergrad, even though she'd bounced from one art school to another for years without graduating from any of them. I meant it. I wanted to be supportive. But when she mentioned the tuition, how much it cost, how she didn't even think she could afford it until Mom and Dad helped out, my fork froze halfway to my mouth. My mother smiled then, a quick flicker of pride. "We pulled some things together," she said vaguely. "Had to make sure a girl had a chance to chase her dream." That night, I checked the college fund account I had watched grow since I was 13. I had never touched it, never needed to. I had planned around it, depended on it, budgeted my entire educational path with it in mind. It was gone. Not low. Not transferred.
Gone.
Zero balance.
No explanación. No conversación.
No warning. Just erased like it was never for me in the first place. I didn't confront them immediately. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't even ask why. I just sat at the edge of my bed, stared at the ceiling, and tried to make the math line up with the memory. I had worked so hard. All through high school, I took AP classes, worked part-time, tutored middle schoolers on weekends. I never complained. I stayed in on Friday nights to study, skipped spring break to volunteer. I had a plan. I had always had a plan. And they knew that. So what did it mean, really, when they handed my future to someone who hadn't even finished what she started? At first, I thought it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. Maybe they had moved the money and forgotten to tell me. But when I casually brought up the subject at dinner 2 weeks later, my dad said something that still echoes in my head every time I think about giving people the benefit of the doubt. "You're smart. You'll figure something out. You always do." Like that excused everything. Like that meant I didn't deserve what I had been promised. I nodded then, not because I agreed, but because I knew they had already decided I was fine. And if you're fine, people stop seeing you. I didn't get bitter. Not right away. I got resourceful. I deferred my admission to Columbia, took a job as a receptionist at a real estate office downtown, and started saving. I rented a room in a shared apartment that smelled like mildew in the summer and ran cold in the winter. I kept to myself, worked long hours, and studied every night after my shift. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every dollar I earned became a seed, and I planted each one with quiet precision. Then something strange happened. One night, after a particularly grueling 12-hour shift, I came home to find my roommate crying in the living room. Her startup idea, something she'd been toying with for months, had just been stolen by a guy she pitched it to at a networking event. She was devastated, angry,
Exhausted.
I listened, offered her tea, sat with her in the silence that followed. And as she talked, I realized something. She hadn't protected her idea. She hadn't documented her design. She hadn't thought it through. She had passion but no plan. And I had plans. I had always had plans. That night, I opened a blank document on my old laptop and started writing. Not a story. Not a resume. A concept. An idea I had buried a year ago when I thought my life was going to follow the path I had been promised. A hybrid productivity and financial planning app for young professionals and students navigating life without traditional support systems. I called it Sparrow because even small things take flight. At first, it was just sketches,
Notes.
diagrams. But something in me shifted. The loss of that fund didn't make me weak. It made me ruthless with focus. For months, I poured every free hour into it. I taught myself basic coding, watched startup pitch videos like they were religion, read every article on product market fit and MVPs and user experience. I lived on caffeine and oatmeal and pure obsession. When I was finally ready, I built a prototype with a no-code tool, shared it with a few people I met in online forums, and got my first 100 users. Then 500. Then 1,000. I didn't sleep much during that time. I didn't have to. Obsession is a kind of energy. I still saw my family on holidays, sat at the same table, brought the same casserole I always brought. They didn't ask about my work. They asked about my sister's travels, her new photography exhibit, her Instagram followers. I smiled, nodded, and kept my world small and sacred. They thought I was just drifting. They thought I was still figuring it out. They didn't know I had launched a beta version that was already attracting attention from a few niche influencers online. They didn't know I had been invited to speak at a virtual startup summit. They didn't know because they never asked. My sister sent postcards from Paris. My mother framed them. My father bragged about her to anyone who would listen. I didn't mind. I had something better than praise. I had proof. Real traction. Real feedback. Real growth. And deep down, I was building something they would never be able to ignore. Then came the offer. A small VC firm that focused on socially impactful tech reached out through a mutual connection. They had seen the demo, liked the metrics, wanted a meeting. I didn't tell anyone. I prepared in silence. I wrote the pitch deck in a single weekend, practiced my delivery in the mirror at midnight, recorded myself until every sentence landed clean. The meeting lasted 32 minutes. By the end, they said they'd circle back. 3 days later, I got the term sheet. $200,000 for 20%.
Not life-changing yet.
But it was a start. I signed it alone. No celebration. Just a whispered promise to myself that I wasn't going to waste it. In the months that followed, everything moved fast. I hired 2 developers from a freelance platform, cleaned up the UX, ran targeted ads with the remaining funds. The growth was organic, word-of-mouth driven, sticky. Sparrow wasn't just an app. It was a toolkit for people like me. People who had been left to figure things out without a safety net. People who had been called resilient like it was a compliment when really it was a way to ignore their needs. I still didn't say a word to my family. Until Forbes happened. But that's not this part of the story yet. This part is still the becoming. The cold nights, the unpaid invoices, the quiet rejections, the loneliness. This part is where I learned how to build while grieving what I had lost. Because grief doesn't always come from death. Sometimes it comes from discovering that the people you trusted with your dreams gave them to someone else. But I wasn't bitter. I was becoming. Quietly.
Steadily.
And one day, they were going to see it. They just didn't know yet. There's a certain quiet thrill in watching people underestimate you. I didn't need to announce what I was building. I didn't need applause. I needed results. And the results were coming. By the time my sister posted a video montage of her weekend in Florence with moody jazz music and folk-handed coffee sips, Sparrow had just crossed 20,000 users. Real people. Real engagement. Feedback rolling in daily. The kind that doesn't come from pity or hype, but from usefulness. The kind that sticks. I wasn't selling aesthetics. I was building survival. And it was working. But then, something happened that I didn't expect. One of the users emailed me late one night. Not a support ticket. Not a bug complaint. Just a message titled, "Thank you." She told me how she'd been couch surfing after getting kicked out by her parents, trying to keep her school life afloat while juggling 3 side gigs. She said Sparrow helped her organize her chaos. Helped her breathe. "I don't feel so alone," she wrote. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just solving my problem. I was solving something bigger. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone either. Around that time, an old teacher of mine forwarded my app to a local journalist she knew. Small blog, nothing flashy, but they reached out and asked for an interview. I hesitated. I had gotten so good at being invisible, at building behind the curtain. But something told me to say yes. The article dropped the following Tuesday, titled, "The app built in a basement that's quietly saving broke students everywhere." It didn't go viral. It didn't even crack 10,000 views. But it reached the right inbox. That's how Forbes found me. At first, I thought it was spam. When I saw the subject line, Forbes feature consideration, I almost deleted it. But curiosity won. It was real. A junior contributor had seen the blog post, tested the app, and wanted to include it in a write-up about women-led tech startups disrupting traditional finance. I said yes with a kind of cautious excitement, like stepping into the light for the first time after being underground for years. They didn't tell me the published date, so when the article actually dropped, it caught me off guard. I was refilling my bus pass when my phone started vibrating nonstop. Old coworkers, distant cousins. Even the girl from high school who once laughed at my thrift store shoes messaged, "Wait, is this you?" And then the group chat lit up. The family group chat. My mother's message came first. Just a screenshot of the article, circled in pink like a proud aunt showing off her niece's honor roll. "Our girl made it," she wrote. No mention of what they had done.
No apology. No acknowledgement.
Just praise now that the spotlight had turned. Suddenly, I was theirs again. My father followed with a thumbs-up emoji and a vague, "We always knew you were destined for big things." I stared at the screen for a long time. That word again, always. As if the betrayal never happened. As if my sacrifice had been their plan all along. But the real twist came an hour later when my sister texted me directly for the first time in over a year. "Hey, can we talk?"
No emojis. No flairists.
Just 3 small words that felt heavier than anything she'd ever said to me. I ignored it for a day. Then 2. Then curiosity got the better of me. We met at a cafe downtown. She was already sitting when I arrived, sunglasses perched on her head, latte untouched. Her hair was perfect, her eyes tired. She smiled like we were old friends, but I didn't return it. I sat down and waited. She didn't waste time. "I'm happy for you," she said. "Really? It's incredible what you've built." I nodded once.
Polite. Guarded.
Then she added, "I didn't know they gave you nothing. I thought you chose not to go. I thought you didn't want to." That part stung. The rewriting. The idea that they didn't even tell her the truth. I asked her then, calmly, if she ever wondered why I suddenly dropped out of college plans and vanished into a receptionist job. She looked down, sheepish. "I thought you were lost." No, I wasn't lost. I was erased. I didn't fight. I didn't raise my voice. I just told her the truth, about the account, about the silence, about the way they told me I'd figure it out, while she got the dreams I had spent years building for myself. She looked uncomfortable, but she didn't deny it. And then, almost like it burned her mouth to say it, she whispered, "I'm sorry." I didn't say it's okay. Because it wasn't. But I nodded. That was enough.
For now.
That week, I was contacted by 2 more VC firms. One of them offered triple the valuation. I countered, negotiated, closed the deal. I moved into a better apartment, hired a CTO. Sparrow was no longer an idea or even a scrappy app. It was a company, a brand, a future. And then, as always, the next twist arrived uninvited. My mother called, not to congratulate me, not to ask how I was, but because my sister was in trouble. She had dropped out of the grad program, run out of money, and was back home trying to figure things out. My mother asked if I could help. Alone. Just something to help her get back on her feet. She said it like it was normal, like it was obvious, like it was my duty. I laughed. Not out loud. Not rudely. Just inside. Quiet and hollow. I told her no. Not cruelly. Just clearly. I reminded her of the fund. The promises. The silence. And she said, "But you have so much now. Can't you spare a little?" That's when I realized something. They didn't understand what they had taken from me because they never believed it belonged to me in the first place. I didn't hang up. I let her talk. Let her plead. Then I told her I wished them both well, but I would no longer be the backup plan for people who never planned for me.
She cried. I didn't.
I had already done my grieving. After that call, things shifted. The family group chat went quiet again. My father stopped forwarding articles. My sister deleted her Instagram for a while. I kept building. Months passed. Sparrow hit a milestone. 100,000 users. We got a feature on TechCrunch. A mid-sized bank approached us for a licensing deal. I flew to San Francisco for the first time and pitched on a stage in front of 200 people. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. I was ready, not just with data and strategy, but with memory, with fire. And yet, the biggest twist hadn't arrived yet. Not until I came home one evening to a letter. Not an email. Not a message. A letter in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. From my sister. She didn't ask for money. She didn't make excuses. She said she was sorry again. But this time, for more than just the money. She apologized for letting them pit us against each other. For pretending not to see my struggle. For not being brave enough to ask the hard questions. And then she said something I never expected. She wanted to work for me. Not in a position of power. Not as a partner. She wanted to learn, to rebuild, to start from scratch like I had. Teach me, she wrote. I want to build something too, and I think I need to earn it this time. I didn't reply right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because I needed to sit with it. All of it. The betrayal. The silence. The strange full circle of it all. I wasn't sure what I'd say. I wasn't sure if I could trust it. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't the quiet one anymore. I was the story now. I didn't say yes. But I didn't say no either. Her letter stayed on my desk for weeks, untouched but unreadable from distance. It wasn't the words I was afraid of, it was the weight.
What it meant if I said yes.
What it could cost me. I had built everything alone. My company, my stability, my name. And now the very person who once replaced my future wanted a piece of the world I had built in silence. What would I be inviting in if I opened that door again? Sparrow was growing faster than expected. We just launched our new mentorship hub, connecting users with volunteer professionals who could offer financial coaching, and the response was overwhelming. Thousands signed up in the first week. We were expanding, hiring a community team, onboarding advisors, getting interest from institutions we'd never dreamed of. On paper, everything was perfect, but I was unraveling quietly. Not because of work, because of the past. Some part of me kept circling back to the letter. I would read it at night when the house was still, when even my own breath felt intrusive. She sounded sincere, but so had other people. People who took without asking. Who called it love while carving your dreams into donations. I had every reason to delete the message, to let her drift out of orbit again. But I didn't. Because no matter how successful I became, I still had the ache. The one that wondered if healing ever meant revisiting the wreckage. Then something else happened. We'd been working on Sparrow's next funding round, Series A. The meetings were intense. Bigger players. Higher stakes. My legal team suggested bringing in someone to help manage the brand side of things. PR, storytelling, user content. It wasn't my strength, and I knew it. We interviewed 3 people. None of them clicked. The 4th was a recommendation from someone on the board. A woman named Leah, with a deep portfolio and a sharp mind. She came in with confidence and strategy. She knew how to shape a story without bending the truth. By the end of the interview, I offered her the job. Leah was the one who convinced me to share more of my story publicly. Not just the app or the numbers, but the heart of it. She said, people connect to pain before they celebrate success. I resisted at first. I had buried the pain for a reason. But one night, after rereading my sister's letter for the 100th time, I sat down and wrote a blog post. Not angry. Not bitter. Just honest. I titled it Resilience Isn't Free, What It Cost Me to Build a Startup After Losing Everything. I told the truth. About the fund.
About my family.
About watching someone else be handed the dream I bled for. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. The story was mine, and it rang clear. When it went live, I expected backlash. What I got was an avalanche of connection. Thousands of messages. Women who had been sidelined. Daughters who had been made invisible. Founders who built empires from ashes. The response broke something in me. Not in a painful way, but in a way that made space for breath I didn't know I'd been holding. And then the next twist landed. One of the Series A investors pulled out. Quietly.
No explanación.
My team was stunned. I reached out to their associate for clarity. The email came back short. Concerns over potential family drama damaging the brand. There it was. Even in truth, there was risk. Even in telling my story, someone saw it as a threat. I sat in my office, staring at the screen, fury rising not because they left, but because I realized how fragile everything still was. How people still wage your worth by your lack of mess. But before I could spiral, something else arrived. A letter from my father.
Typed.
Formal.
Cold.
He had read the article. He said it was unbecoming to share private matters for public sympathy. That family should remain sacred. That publicizing one side of a complex story was reckless and disrespectful. He ended it with a single line that undid me. You've made it clear who you really are.
No apology. No reflection.
Just a quiet exile disguised as moral high ground. I didn't cry. I got up, walked to my bookshelf, and pulled out the first notebook I ever used for Sparrow. Inside were sketches, receipts, dates, evidence. Not for court. For clarity. For remembering. Because sometimes healing means reminding yourself that you're not crazy. The next day, I made a decision. I emailed my sister. I told her I had a trial task. A real one. Build out a content strategy for our mentorship platform. 3 weeks. No pay. No promises. Just effort. She accepted the same day. And surprisingly, she delivered. She sent drafts. Asked questions. Took feedback. She didn't whine or deflect. She just worked. By the end of the 3rd week, our engagement numbers had improved. Her ideas were fresh. Unpolished, but rooted in empathy. She understood the users in a way I hadn't expected. Because maybe for the first time, she wasn't trying to look good. She was trying to be good. I offered her a part-time role. Entry level. Still no special treatment. She accepted, without hesitation. And then slowly, something shifted. She started asking questions about my life. About the early days. About how I had kept going when everything seemed like a wall. I answered cautiously. Then honestly. And in those late-night Slack messages and awkward check-ins, a new kind of bridge began to form. Not trust.
Not yet.
But recognition. Meanwhile, our funding round closed with a better investor. One who read the blog and said, "This is the kind of founder I want in my portfolio." Sometimes, truth filters the right people in. For a while, life calmed. But stories like mine don't coast for long. I found out through a forwarded email. A college friend sent me a link. A podcast interview. My father. Talking about generational responsibility. About how families should raise strong daughters. About how he supported both of his girls equally and watched them thrive in different ways. I listened to every word. Every crafted lie. Every revision of history. And then I closed the laptop. I didn't call him. I didn't rage. I just opened a blank document and wrote a new internal memo. Our stories aren't burdens. They're blueprints. And then I told Leah I wanted to launch a campaign. We called it Blueprint. A digital anthology of stories from people who built their lives without a net. Real stories. From real users. Told with dignity. The first story was mine. The second was my sister's. She titled it, "Starting Over at the Bottom of a Ladder My Sister Built." I didn't edit it. I let it be. It took months, but the campaign exploded. We weren't just a finance tool anymore. We were a movement. Investors came. Brands reached out. Schools requested access. Sparrow wasn't just known. It was needed. And still, I didn't call my parents. Because the truth is, some wounds don't close with time. They close with distance. One afternoon, after a press panel, my sister found me backstage. She handed me something wrapped in old tissue paper. I unwrapped it slowly. It was a copy of my old college fund account statement, the one with my name on it. At the top, a handwritten note. I found it in Mom's desk. I thought you should have it back. I folded it quietly, said nothing, but something in me softened. I didn't forgive them. Not fully. But I had outgrown the part of me that needed to be forgiven to feel whole. I wasn't building from spite anymore. I was building from vision. And this time, no one could take it from me. By the time Sparrow hit 500,000 users, the noise around me was louder than ever, but inside I was quieter. I had grown into this strange stillness, not peace, not detachment, but something firmer. The kind of clarity that comes after you've watched people rewrite you enough times to finally decide to hold the pen yourself. My sister was still working with the team. She hadn't asked for a title upgrade or favors. She clocked in, did her tasks, and asked thoughtful questions. Most people didn't even know she was my sister. I kept it that way on purpose. And then the university called. Not my old university, the one I never got to attend, but another, a top-tier institution in the city that wanted to invite me as a guest speaker for their Women in Innovation lecture series. I should have been thrilled. Part of me was. But another part of me paused. This wasn't just a talk. It was the kind of thing my parents would see in the paper. It was the kind of public moment that stirred family ghosts. I accepted anyway. The night before the event, I stayed late in the office. Not to prep. Just to sit. Sometimes when you come from a place of lack, your body forgets how to enjoy success. You just keep bracing, waiting for the next betrayal. But that night, there was no storm. Just me, alone with my name on the door, in a building I once dreamed about owning a chair in. The talk went well. Better than I expected. The room was full. There were students live-tweeting quotes, tagging me in posts, asking questions that proved they weren't just listening, they were relating. I told the story. Not every detail, but enough. Enough to show what it meant to build something from nothing, and to lose the people you thought would clap for you along the way. When I walked off stage, the applause felt like closure I hadn't asked for. And then I saw them. In the back of the auditorium, half shadowed by the doorway, stood my mother. I froze. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't crying. Just watching. Like she'd wandered in by accident but couldn't bring herself to leave. She didn't say a word. Just lifted her hand slightly, like a peace offering or a goodbye. I didn't wave back. I just stared until she disappeared. That night, I found a letter on my doorstep. No postage. No envelope. Just a folded sheet of paper with 2 sentences in my mother's script. I don't know how to fix what I didn't see breaking.
But I see you now.
I didn't respond. I didn't have words. Just a strange, quiet ache in my ribs, like a bruise that didn't hurt but never really healed. Weeks passed. Sparrow was in the final stages of a government partnership pilot program. We were expanding into public school districts, building free access packages for under-resourced communities. Everything was moving, but inside, something was still stuck. The next twist didn't come from family. It came from within. Leah called me into a meeting with legal. They had found a duplicate registration attempt on our IP. Someone had filed a trademark request under a suspiciously similar name and logo. A background check traced it back to someone I hadn't heard in years.
Tobias.
My sister's ex-boyfriend. The same one who once used my sister's account to funnel money out of mine back when I still trusted people casually. He had tried to launch a knockoff of Sparrow using my early branding materials, which I realized, sickly, I had left in a shared folder years ago when my sister borrowed my laptop during their relationship. I felt it again, the old panic. The betrayal buried so deep I thought I'd outgrown it. This wasn't just personal. It was strategic. He had registered the copycat in a state where we hadn't yet filed regional rights. The timing wasn't accidental. It was precise. We filed a cease and desist within 24 hours. Our attorneys got on it fast. But still it hurt. My sister came to my office the next day, shaking. She'd found out from our internal Slack thread. I didn't know, she said, over and over. I didn't know he kept anything. I didn't even know he remembered Sparrow. I believed her. But I didn't say that. I let her sit in the discomfort. I let the silence stretch. Because some lessons need space to settle. We won the filing battle. Tobias disappeared. Probably ran out of audacity or lawyers. But the damage lingered. Not to Sparrow.
To me.
That week, I took a short leave. I told the board it was strategic rest. Truth was, I needed air. I went to the coast. Stayed in a small Airbnb with white walls and no internet. Just waves and paper and time. And that's when I wrote it. The letter. To my younger self. I didn't say she deserved better. I didn't say she was enough. I told her she didn't imagine it. The coldness. The silence. The way she disappeared in her own home. I told her she had every right to walk away. And that not returning didn't mean bitterness. It meant survival. Then I folded it.
Lit à cendre.
Burned the letter in a ceramic bowl and let the smoke carry it. When I came back, I changed everything. Weary structured Sparrow. Built a fellowship arm for young founders with no backing. No safety net. We called it the Quiet Ones. It wasn't just funding.
It was mentorship.
Guidance. A platform for girls like me, who were told they'd figure it out simply, because no one else would. My sister ran the first cohort. She never once mentioned our past in her sessions. But one night, after a long day, she left a note on my desk. Thank you for not making me start over somewhere else. I know I didn't earn this easily, but I'm going to earn it honestly. I didn't reply, but this time I smiled. Because some stories don't end with revenge. They end with responsibility. The first snowfall came early that year. I remember because it blanketed the city like silence. Thick, cold, almost peaceful. It felt fitting. Sparrow had just passed 1 million users, the kind of number that makes people stop under their breath when they say it. Investors called it magic.
I called it math.
Strategy. Scar tissue. We held a celebration at the office. Nothing grand. Pizza, music, laughter echoing against glass walls. My team danced between desks with paper crowns and soda bottles. My sister brought a tray of cupcakes. She'd stayed up baking herself. I watched her laugh with the interns hand someone a plate, adjust the volume on the speaker when it got too loud. For a second, I saw a different version of the girl I grew up with. One who hadn't gotten everything handed to her. One who had finally learned to hold what mattered with both hands. I thought that would be the last twist. The final page. But then came the envelope. Not a lawsuit. Not a bank notice. Just a plain, white envelope slipped under my door. No return address. No markings. Just my name written in a careful hand I hadn't seen in years. I opened it slowly, expecting sentiment or apology, or another layer of guilt. What I got was a will. A revised one. From my grandmother. Inside, a note. They never told you, did they? I left it to you. All of it. The house. The land. The account. But your parents changed the executor without notifying the lawyer. Said you were too young. Too lost. I only found out when I asked why you hadn't called. You never got the letter because they never sent it. Attached were photocopies. Legal forms. Her original instructions. Her signature. A time-stamped email to my father asking why it had all gone silent after her passing. I sat down.
Hard.
This wasn't about tuition anymore. This wasn't even about the fund. It was about legacy. About being erased with intent. About being the girl everyone assumed would be fine, so they carved her out of the story entirely before she had a chance to write her chapter. I called my lawyer. Quietly.
Carefully.
Not for court. Not yet. But for truth. I had spent years learning how to document betrayal. This time, I had a paper trail. And my grandmother's voice, whispering through dotted lines. It was always yours. The estate was complicated. So much time had passed. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that I had it now. The land was modest, just a small patch of wooded hillside and a crumbling farmhouse on the edge of the county. But to me, it was sacred. A place no one could take from me again. I didn't call my parents.
I didn't need to.
News travels fast in families that like to pretend they're close. Within a week, my mother emailed. The tone was civil. The content, not surprising. We thought we were protecting you. You seemed too focused on other things. It wasn't malicious. It was just practical. We're sorry it didn't come out sooner. It wasn't an apology. It was justification, dressed in linen and served with a side of revisionist memory. I didn't reply. Instead, I drove out to the farmhouse. It was worse than I remembered. Peeling paint, a rusted gate, weeds so tall they swallowed the front steps. But I stood there, in the snow and silence, and I didn't feel rage. I felt recognition. This was mine, and I would decide what it became. That winter, Sparrow launched its first in-person initiative, a retreat for young women starting over. Not founders, not CEOs, just girls at the edge of something, trying to believe they were enough. I hosted the first one at the farmhouse. After it had been cleaned, patched, repaired, not perfectly, just enough to hold warmth. My sister was there too. She didn't speak much during the sessions. She took notes, served tea, helped clean up. But on the last night, she pulled me aside under the porch light and said, "I didn't know they took that from you too." If I had known, I stopped her. It didn't matter anymore, because I had it now, and I was building something out of the ashes. The next spring, we broke ground on a new structure behind the old house, a studio, part workshop, part digital classroom. A space for the ones like me, who were too often told to just figure it out. The walls would be filled with stories. The doors wide open. I never told the press about the will. I didn't need to. Not all truths need to be broadcast. Some are just for the ones who survived them. Sparrow kept growing. We hired more. We reached farther. Government agencies used our framework. Financial publications cited our approach. I stopped introducing myself as the girl who got overlooked. I started introducing myself as the woman who built something no one could delete. And then, 1 year after Forbes named me one of the top 30 under 30 women shaping finance, I received another letter. From Joy. Not the emotion. The niece I thought I'd lost. She was older now. In high school. She had read the campaign blog.
She had used the app.
She had seen the truth through a lens her mother could never filter. "I think I finally get it now," she wrote. "You weren't gone. You were pushed. But you never stopped building. And that makes me want to build too." Enclosed was a bracelet. 2 strings. Braided. Knotted.
Familiar.
The one she made me years ago. The one I had once thought lost forever. It didn't bring tears. Not this time. It brought breath.
Room.
A quiet kind of peace. Not from being right, but from being free. Now, every year, I return to that old farmhouse on the first snowfall. I light a candle for the girl who thought silence meant strength. For the girl who carried the weight so others could shine. And then I blow it out, not to forget but to release. Because the truth is, I didn't just get erased. I got rewritten. By myself. Line by line. And this ending? It wasn't theirs to give. It was mine to earn. And I earned every word.